Hello and welcome to Journey to SEA 2025. This is your host, creative writing specialist Shellyan Edwards Barron, here to talk to you about reports, narratives, and comprehension. Thank you for those of you who are joining the lives and sending me messages. I really, really appreciate you. And for those of you who are new, if this is your first live, we're actually on to episode 37, so you have a little bit of catching up to do. But it's possible, and you can go through the archives and find all the materials where I spoke about reports from the very beginning in terms of what is required. We spoke about narratives, step by step, and comprehension, going into some details so that your child can do the best they can with your support, or if you're working with students, that you're able to help them as best as you can. And so in today's episode, we're going to be talking about, let me get the slides up before so I could show you. Yeah, we're going to be talking about a little bit about spelling and punctuation and activity reports. We're also going to be taking another look at climax and the folklore and fairy tale type of story, as well as with comprehension, we're touching in on poetry. And so we have a lineup today. And now, for those of you who are new and you want to know a little bit about who I am, I finally put up the About page on my website. So you can check that out. It's on wordcoach.com, and that's werdcoach.com, and go to the About page. You learn a little bit about me, but I'll tell you just a little bit now. I believe in something called multisensory learning, and that means using multiple senses in a lesson. And this is specifically with creative writing. Now, this kind of learning is done a lot in social studies and science and math, engineering, all the other subjects that, we think of as hands-on. But when it comes to writing, somehow we tend to think that the best way is to read and write only. Now, that is not exactly the case, and you can actually engage students with lots of activities. For example, I do experiments and games and lots of different interactive stuff in my lessons to make students actually enjoy writing because, writing is a thing for some people, and most people, the average person, actually hates writing when writing is just a skill, and if we learn how to do it well, we can all write well. So that's the mission I'm on, and I'm using multisensory learning to get that across to the primary school students. And sometimes I use it with adults as well because it really does make a difference. So let's get into our session today. And if you're following along, first I do some reminders. And if you're new, I do a bit of reminders, some lessons that I was reminded of for the week before I get into the actual topic. So this week, um, I was reminded that encouragement goes a long way and that we really do need to remember to keep telling students how to make the changes that they need. It's not just about identifying the issues, but we have to show them how to do it and keep reminding them. So this is a time when we are going to need a lot of patience because at this point, students are under a lot of pressure, doing a lot of work and practice, and they might start forgetting things that we thought that they know and that they should know and that we taught them several times. And so instead of getting frustrated at this point thinking, but I taught you this already, um, think about finding new strategies for students to remember, give them tools and acronyms and step by step, do this first and then this next kind of thing, so that you could really get students to implement systems, because it's not just about knowing things, it's about remembering when and how to do it. And so implementing a system or a habit that has them following a particular strategy, that's the way to really get them to do their best. So don't get frustrated if they say something or do something and you wonder what is going on with the child. Take a deep breath, step back from the situation a little bit, and think about how you can reintroduce it, perhaps in a slightly different way that will get them paying attention and remembering what it is they need to do. All right. And so, yeah, we really do need to keep telling them that. And all along the way, encouraging them and supporting them and pointing out the things that they're doing well and the things that would help them. Yeah. And then like I said, if it is they're not remembering things and you're wondering what's going on, maybe it's time to switch it up a little bit, and not just rely on giving them practice after practice. Maybe it's time to, like, introduce some acronyms and different things. And sometimes that works because remember, we're aiming toward helping the students with what works. Maybe something worked last term and it helped them last term, but this term, because they're under a little bit more stress, they may not be remembering. So we try something new to reinforce. And so we're encouraging, we're reminding, and we might need to switch it up a little bit. All right. So, okay, so let's get into what we're talking about today for reports, which is the spelling, punctuation, and a little bit about activity reports. Yeah. So, here's the thing with spelling. Just like everything else that we've been covering so far, it's really about strategies. I've had situations where students, in the heat of the moment and in the writing, they make spelling errors that, lots of people might call silly spelling errors, but something is causing the error. And so what you want to do is to think about, okay, is the child under a little bit of stress? What can you do? Maybe double down on some spelling practice, but also you want to help them make the most of their revision time, because that's the time when they can go back and make changes. Quite often, students notice their errors, but if they're rushing and they don't have time to double check, then they can't make changes that would help them increase their marks. So you want to make sure that they're able to write the report within a certain time and have enough time to review. 5 minutes is minimum. If they could manage 10 minutes of review time where they can check spelling, and of course they're going to have a checklist of what they're going to be reviewing, then that is going to help a lot because they know they would be able to go back and make as many changes as possible within the time frame. So sometimes it's about creating a strategy to deal with the errors that are coming up while you are working on minimizing the error. All right. And then with punctuation, we really have like end of sentence punctuation. With a report, you're looking at full stops. And then within sentence punctuation, and again with a report, the main thing would be a comma. So you really want to focus on those, making sure students know when to end a sentence so they don't end up with run-on sentences and having challenges like that. And then you want to look at using the commas effectively where there are inserted information, examples, um, interjections, those kinds of things, like at the beginning of sentences when you're using transition phrases. Identify the areas where commas are most used in a report and have the child go over those, make sure they know those rules, and they can fix errors when they're reviewing, right? So those are the like main things with spelling and punctuation. make sure you monitor and you notice, okay, what are the spelling areas? Like some children might have issues with homonyms. Pay attention to those so that they could go back and make the changes when needed. Pronouns, whatever the errors are with the mechanics of the writing, that's the spelling, punctuation, word choice, those kinds of things. Yeah, you want to go back to those and, well, when I say word choice, like word choice in terms of the homonyms, those kinds of things, those grammatical issues, and create a strategy. If there are a lot of errors, then you know you're dealing with some fundamental issues. But if the errors are things that the students say, oh, no, I knew that, then work on strategies for that review time so that changes can be made while you are working on removing as many of the errors as possible. Okay, and so when it comes to activities, reports, that should be activity reports. Okay. Um, we're paying attention now to situations where participants might work together or alone to create or do something they might learn from. So we're looking at like, creating posters, making projects, going on a field trip, those kinds of activities. And that is what I would group together in an activity report because they kind of follow the similar format. And so once students understand what kind of report they're reading is going to be, well, writing is going to be a little bit easier for them to put the ideas together because they understand what kind of details they're going to put. And so that makes a difference with students filling out their report in terms of having even enough content so that the report would feel substantial and not just giving strict, straight up details. This is another opportunity to look at the summary kind of idea. You know, um, a student was bullied. I know I use that example a lot, but I still see it from time to time. You know, um, a student was caught bullying another student, but then what does that mean exactly? What were the exact actions? Because remember, students are supposed to be reporting on what they observed. When they say they observed bullying, that's not a specific action. That's a group of action or a type of action that they have summarized or deduced or come to a certain conclusion. And that's going to reduce the amount of content in the report and not be as detailed as they could be. And so that's what you want them to pay attention to. Um, a reminder with activities, you want to include supervisors and tour guides, give details of what these people did and said in the report. Again, making up the content and being as detailed as possible. And then finally, you want to mention in paragraph 2, purpose of the activity, gathering materials, and then in the ending, I know some students struggle with knowing how to end a report, especially a report like this. Then you might want to pay attention to tidying up, depending on the kind of activity, and any lessons learned, which could come out in conversation or a question and answer period after maybe a field trip or something like that. And that way you can introduce some of the ideas at the end of the report. So these are the things that you're double checking this week. You're going through activity reports again. So yeah, you see, I'm reading exactly what's on screen. Activity reports again. And then you are going through some details, practicing the introductions. Always work on introductions first because that is that summary answering who, what, where, when. You'd be surprised at what students are writing, and many times they're including details from the rest of the report in the introduction. Remember, if you don't have a copy of the frequently asked questions, you can go to the ministry's website. Um, moe.gov.tt and go to the primary school resources page, there is a document there called Frequently Asked Questions for report writing. I think they call it report writing frequently asked questions. Um, Find that document and take a look through there. There's a guideline that talks about what goes into the introduction, and it's a fairly simple format. Now, I tell my students that we add a little bit in terms of saying who was responsible and who was involved, giving some more details about them. But remember, you're giving brief details. You're not adding so much as if you're starting the information part and content part of the report just yet. That is to go in paragraph 2. So again, always practice that format for the introduction. I teach a specific 4-sentence format that I give students. My ideal is 3 sentences, but some teachers require that fourth sentence. And if you go to the frequently asked questions, you'd realize it's not a requirement for students to get marks. But then again, remember we're elevating so that we could hit exemplary, and that's going to mean adding in a little bit more, but we have to be careful about what we're adding to make sure we still fit within this concept of the introduction being a summary. And so that's something that you want to pay attention to this week. And so we're looking at before, during, and after. So this is body paragraphs 2, 3, and 4. And then you'd have the introduction, which is a summary, and then the concluding paragraph, which is paragraph 5, and that would round out the 5-paragraph structure. You're going back to vocabulary and terminology for activities, and then we want to write a complete activity report this week, right? Let's see. Okay, so in terms of resources for the planning part of reports, and of course you're getting 25 prompts with this, um, lots of notes and information. If you want examples as well, then this is the one to get. It includes the example reports. You do get prompts. You get a detailed um, paragraph by paragraph breakdown of what goes into a report and the different kinds. So notice the different booklets. So this is digital, and there's a booklet on each type of report, plus an introductory booklet, plus additional booklets on vocabulary, some on analyzing prompts and different things. And so it is a fairly comprehensive package that allows students who are heading into the exam. These are advanced students, not students who are just beginning. For those who are just beginning, my textbook series is the better one to work with because that goes into different sections like reported speech and tone and those types of things. And so this one is for really advanced students who are drilling down, practicing, and may have some challenges still. And okay, so now on to narrative writing. We're dealing with climax again, folklore, and fairy tale. So the thing with climax is that we need to remember that climax is part of a bigger picture. And of all the things that are misunderstood in stories, climax is that thing. And so when students learn about climax, sometimes they're told that climax is a turning point. I mean, that's literally, in terms of literature, what climax is. But at this level, we want to break things down in a way that students can understand and see how it fits within the larger scheme of things and the entire story. And so we talk about the problem solution path. I'm not going to go through this in a whole lot of detail and I wrote it down because I went and I checked in episode 23. So I think you could look at episode 22, 23, and 24 when I went into a lot of detail with climax. And so but I know specifically episode 23 is when I went into this problem solution path breakdown to make sure that you understand how climax works as part of this section of the story. And so the idea is that climax is pretty much a combination of the getting help and dealing with the problem, solving the problem. I know many teachers tell students that climax is when you meet the biggest problem, but this is not the case. The climax has to be a turning point in the story. And when the character meets the problem, that's not the turning point. Things haven't happened yet. They haven't reacted. They haven't solved anything. The problem is still there. So it cannot be the turning point. And teachers also say, well, okay, the climax is the most exciting part of the story. But if you're now meeting the problem, how is that exciting? And so I've gone over this several times. So if you're still having some issues with this, my recommendation is to go back to the um the archives, go back to the previous videos, look up for the ones that deal with climax. I know episode 23 is definitely one of them. And so you're asking yourself, this is like the main thing. Why is climax the most exciting part of the story? And the answer is because you're dealing with solving the problem. And so main character is active. Solution doesn't come easily, so they have to work for it. And then emotions are strong. And that is why it's the most exciting part of the story. And so think about that carefully. And once you get climax positioned in the right place and dealt with in the right way for a story, then you'd be able to get, that exciting part of the story. And so what you want to deal with then when you're practicing and you're working with the folklore and fairy tale, go back to that idea of the climax being that exciting part of the story and how the solutions come about. And it would really make a difference with stories. And so, just a recap of this. So, yes, I did go through this before. And again, go back into the archives. All the videos are labeled. You can find them in SEA, the Peace-Filled Approach. If you're not already a member there, definitely that's a Facebook group. You get tons and tons of help. Lots of math, comprehension, everything is covered in the group. These videos are also posted there. You can go to my website, wordcoach.com, werdcoach.com, and you would find videos archived there. They're also on my Facebook page, which is now called Comprehension and Creative Writing and Comprehension for Primary Schools. You can just look up Word Coach Youth. It's also under that, but definitely the videos are there. They're in like multiple places. So if it is for some reason you can't seem to find a particular episode, WhatsApp me and I'll send you the link for the episode, the YouTube link, which will be the easiest one to send you. All right. But let's go back to folklore and fairy tale. So you want to make sure young writers know about folklore and fairy tale and fairy tales. I mean, we don't talk about them a lot. We don't tell stories about our personal folklore and fairy tales. Um, we do have mermaid stories. I think there's, the Tobago mermaid. We have Papa Bois, Mama Dlo, Dwen, Sukunya, Laja Bless, lots of different characters that can be included in a story. We could go with the traditional route where many of them are scary and so on, or we can have them being misunderstood and being kind. And so lots of different things can come from the imagination using these kinds of stories. And so I had a conversation with a student recently, and she was talking about, thinking about her stories as plain, so like the characters are obvious, the solutions are obvious, and it's like, not enough creativity and thinking, and she was wondering how to get her stories more exciting. Well, there are three things that can be done. Number one, make sure that there are three levels of problems. So we've spoken about rising action over and over, and I'll keep saying it again. You need to have three levels of problems to build the excitement. So the complication, the increase, and the crisis. So that's my new term for the biggest problem, the crisis. It's really helping students understand it a little bit better. Um, so that's number one. Number two, we have to make sure that following up with the problems, we have the characters' emotions and reactions. So they have to say things and do things and feel things in reaction to these three levels of problems. So that's number two. Number three has to do with using conflict from different types of stories, different types of conflict, and thinking about what kind of story you're actually writing. So many students write what we call realistic fiction, which is like, stuff that could actually happen. If you want to think outside the box or think as if there is no box at all, then you want to look at the different kinds of stories. So there's fantasy, science fiction, folklore and fairy tale, which is this one. And then we have action and adventure. Those are the four that really get into some details and make stories exciting. I mean, we do have the thriller and suspense, but we want thrills and suspense through everything. And then there's the mystery, which is a particular genre as well. But again, the ones that students seem to manage more effectively include fantasy, and the folklore and fairy tale is like a kind of fantasy. And then we have the science fiction, which again is a specific kind of fantasy. And then we have the action and adventure, which makes the realistic seem very edgy and thrilling. And so the third way, really, to make stories exciting is to think about the genre that you're writing and what is typical in that genre, especially when it comes to the type of conflict. Because remember, there are different types of conflict. And when I say types in this sense, I mean like where is the conflict coming from? Is it coming from another character? Is it coming from something supernatural? Is it coming from nature? Is it coming from, science and technology? Where is it coming from? And when students really understand that, those three things, the levels of conflict followed by the emotions, all fit within this concept of the genre and the type of story and the type of conflict being used. That is like the guarantee to make stories exciting because it's going to appeal to readers and all their emotions and so on. And one of the things to remember, especially with folklore and fairy tale and all these fantasy types, has to do with the character descriptions. Character descriptions and setting descriptions work really well to enhance the outside the box kind of stories. And so I'm really excited about this, the art of character description. I have completed the additions that I'm doing to include descriptions for non-human characters. And this is something that students can really get into with the non-human character descriptions. Now, it could be something pretty normal, like a dog, or it could be really interesting, like a robot or an alien or something. And so students really need to think about how they can enhance their descriptions to add to the stories. It really makes the stories exciting when we have these unique kinds of conflict, characters feeling lots of emotions, We are tapping into the genre so that readers are familiar with things and what's going on, and then getting these really awesome character descriptions and the setting descriptions as well. So, but I know in particular, really thinking about the ways that they can describe the non-human characters as something that students really do need to pay attention to as well. And so this worksheet kind of has, so it has a charm. Remember the charm, I mentioned this several times before. It's an acronym that helps students really understand how to what are the different aspects of a character's physical description they can include. They can do C is for clothing, H is for hair, A is for accessories, R is for radiance, and M is for markings. And if you want to know more about that, I have a set of worksheets right here that helps you with the human characters and the non-human characters. All right. And it's all digital, by the way. So once it's paid for, it's emailed to you. And of course, if you want sample stories for the different genre that I spoke about, that's what these booklets include. So there are actually, I think, 12 booklets altogether in this one. And so you get the 7 sample stories, so one each. So you're getting realistic fiction, folklore and fairy tales, science fiction, um, action and adventure, mysteries, thriller and suspense, and there's one that I'm missing that I can't remember, which is it. Um, Science fiction, that's my favorite, science fiction, fantasy, right? And so you can see an example of a story in each genre and get a little idea of what are the unique features of each genre so that students could really expand their thinking and make their stories exciting and as creative as possible. All right. And so that's the end for narratives, and now we're moving on to comprehension. And this week we're focusing on poetry. And so again, this is a repetition. Remember, this is our third time around. We go forward, we come back, we go forward, we come back, and we go forward again, adding more details and refinement as we go. And so with poetry this week, we're reminded that we're talking about entertainment and inspiration. Poetry is often a story and or some reflective piece. Thinking about emotions and actions and so on. We have stanzas and lines and verses and so on. And then unique features. There's a voice of the poem, which is not always the um writer. So the writer may be speaking as if they are a creature or an inanimate object, or you can have two poems. I saw a poem the other day. Um, I wondered, and this is from like a standard 3 textbook. And I thought this was way too advanced for standard 3, but there it was in the textbook. There were there were 4 stanzas. Stanza 1, it was a mother speaking about her child, and in stanza 2, it was the child responding. Then stanza 3, the mother responds again to what the child said, and then the child responds to the mother. And so we have this back and forth, kind of like a conversation in the poem. And I don't know how much explanation there was about the voice and who's speaking and all those things. These are some ways that students can really better understand poems when they understand things like this, like the voice and who is speaking, and so they could have an idea of like what they could read between the lines to understand. And so I thought that was a really interesting poem, especially for that level without having that explanation of voice. One of the unique questions that you would get with poetry is creating a title. So you're not going to get that in a graphic or fiction or nonfiction text. You're never really asked to create a title, but with poetry, you are. Well, you could be. And so students could be. So the idea then is that you want to make sure the students know how to create a title. So you want them to be able to like create, you know, interesting and exciting titles using ideas from the poem, like summarizing and those kinds of things. Yeah. Um, and so for this week, you really do want to review figurative language, sensory language, so that students understand how to really read between the lines. And I think it was like maybe 3 or 4 sessions ago, and I spoke about the activity My Dog Has 4 Cucumbers. So you can go back to that and look it up. My Dog Has 4 Cucumbers, and really understand what you can. This is just one. There are many other activities, but this is one that I found to be most hilarious, and students love doing it. How to get students to recognize that words and meaning and how things are connected, and really getting that starting point of recognizing that you can decipher things and read between the lines, and it helps with context clues, and it helps with those whole figurative language concept and so on. Um, Definitely review context clues and how to create a title, and then you want to do a couple poetry worksheets this week. All right. And in terms of resources, this is what I have at the moment. Answers, including explanations, and then my own creations of different passages using the exam format, and also answers provided with explanations, so that not only are you understanding what is a good answer that would give you marks for a question, the explanation about why it's a good answer is there. So you really want to study the questions and study the answers and study how to create the answers and the different types of texts and so on. And so notes included with an explanation of unique features for each type of text. And we're looking at the 4 different types noted, um, nonfiction, fiction, poems, graphics. And then we have the worksheets with answers and explanations. So, um, really good package. Ideally, you want to get both if you don't already have these answers. You really want to get both so that you could look at the actual exam and then get practice with something that is as close to the exam itself as I could make it. All right. And oh, I forgot to change this. So yeah, this is episode 37 we're dealing with right now. So yeah, I'm gonna change that before the end of the episode. Yeah, so the I think so, yeah. So I did it, but I think I didn't quite complete the slide. But so we're at the end of the episode. We're at the end of focusing on these different sections. So we looked at spelling and punctuation. We looked at activity reports. We looked at climax, folklore. We looked at the poetry, and we looked at the idea that with poetry, remember, it's pretty much like a story or reflection, and that's what you want to focus on. So, episode 37, wrapping up with mechanics, climax, poetry, those are like the key highlights. But of course, remember, these are highlights and reviews. And if it is that you want to get some more details on some of these things, then definitely go back through the archives. All the episodes are labeled so that you can check and see what is covered at each episode and zero in on the area that you want to work with. The format is always reports, narratives, comprehension, so you could skip ahead as needed just to get the details that you absolutely need. So I hope this reminder was useful. And again, you're following your schedule, you're following your plan, making time each day to do some work, giving one day rest because we need the rest in between, and making sure that students get that continued encouragement, practice, and support with the guidance of what to do and how to do it. We always want to remind them of that. Okay, so this is Shellyan Edwards Byron, your creative writing specialist, signing off of Journey to SEA 2025. I look forward to hearing from you. Send your messages. My number is on screen, 717-4993. Ask your question so that I can add it into the next presentation. So have a good one, everyone, and take care.